Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manavistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatya Deshatarine Manchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Scarlett and Katie and Rukmini Priya, Sasha Lee, Shrikant, and Megan and Michael and Andrea. Thank you all so much for being here. Today is actually the disappearance day of Madhavendra Puri. And he exhibited, there's Poppy, welcome Poppy. It said that he exhibited the highest pinnacle of ecstatic love in separation. And Lord Chaitanya actually appeared in the Madhva Sampradaya because of the presence of this Madhavendra Puri. And Lord Chaitanya accepted the disciple of Madhavendra Puri, Ishwara Puri, as his own guru. So I want to highly recommend, if you have a chance, and if you want to be amazed and inspired, you can read the pastime of Madhavendra Puri that's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 4. But I'm going to share with you right now this verse that's considered to be this this highest level of ecstatic love and separation. Let me see if I can, that he chanted at the end of his life. It's kind of a long story. Let me do it without the tambura. So he said, Ai dina Gayatrinatha he, Mathuranath kadava lokase, Hridayam tvad aloka kataram, Dayata brahmyati kim karomyaham. So here's the translation. O my Lord, O most merciful Master, O Master of Mathura, speaking to Krishna, when shall I see you again? Because of my not seeing you, my agitated heart has become unsteady. O most beloved one, what shall I do now? So we're talking tonight about growing love. This is our last of the 4 sessions. So I thought it was so appropriate that today, there's Gail, welcome Gail, that today is actually this disappearance day of Madhavendra Puri. So when Lord Chaitanya told this pastime of Madhavendra Puri to his disciples, after he told it, he just fainted in unconsciousness, in ecstasy. And this verse is considered to be the highest pinnacle of love for Krishna. And it said, the Chaitanya Charitamrita says that there are only 3 people who can understand this verse. Welcome, Dira. There are only 3 people who can understand the meaning or the depth of this verse. One is Madhavendra Puri himself, one is Lord Chaitanya, and one is Radharani. And it's understood that this verse was spoken through the mouth of Madhavendra Puri, but actually spoken by Srimati Radharani. So this is really high stuff. And I kind of feel like, who am I to be speaking about this highest love that's really way, way beyond my understanding and my realization? So I want to give you an example. that I think I shared this example the other night in our Krishna book talk, that sometimes we have to reach above ourselves to place something above and beyond our own height, right? Put something on a shelf that's higher than I am. So that's what I'm actually doing here. I'm speaking about this highest love that's really way beyond me, that I really have no right to be speaking about. But with your permission and praying for the grace of Srila Prabhupada and all the previous acharyas, I'm going to speak anyway. Actually, there's one verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I'm trying to remember it exactly, but Krishnadas Kaviraj says something like this. He says that I have no right to be speaking about this. I think Michael and I were talking about this the other day. I have no right to be speaking about these things, but the people who don't understand won't understand anyway. And the people who do understand will appreciate the sweetness. So here, he's sort of just like audaciously taking permission and going ahead to speak things that really should never be spoken publicly. So yeah, we're talking about growing love. What is love? And how can we get this kind of love? And so 3 questions here. What is love? How can we get this highest love? And what are the goals or the results of if we do get this kind of high love? So first, as we've been doing before in the previous classes, I want to do a little bit of a recap of our previous classes. The last one was 2 weeks ago, so just to refresh our memories a little bit. So we talked about what's called bhajana kriya, or actions in service, our work, our service, cultivating a service relationship with Krishna, the holy name of Krishna, that daily watering process that we try to do with care and attention. That chanting process is compared to be a watering process, watering that creeper of devotion. Yeah. And then we talked about entering a mood of prayer to the holy name, because without deep intention and attention, our chanting can become, so often it does become, mindless, mechanical. And then we talked about beginning with the end in mind, and how successful people begin with the end in mind. Why are we doing this chanting anyway? What do we hope to attain by it? Are we just doing it mindlessly? Yeah, I do this every day. Or is there some very high goal that I'm hoping to achieve? We talked about making advancement. Means it's a process of combining gratitude with humility while desiring Krishna's shelter. So gratitude and humility combined with taking shelter of Krishna. We talked about aligning the body in 3 ways: posture, pronunciation, and listening, and trying to really deeply hear the holy names as they enter our ears. So that was alignment of the body, right? And then we talked about aligning the mind, forgetting the past, that's just memories. Don't think about the future, which is maybe a dream, and dedicate myself to this one moment, hearing the holy name. And gave an example of the patience in having to deal with the 2-year-old, just like the mind is like that talkative 2-year-old, just keep bringing the mind back. We'll talk about that later. Right now we're chanting the holy name, right? And then finally, alignment of the heart. We talked about being in a mood of distress, actually, not a complacent mood, but a mood of distress, longing for the holy name, begging the divine couple for service to the holy name, and longing for that goal of love. Yeah. And when Krishna hears that kind of chanting, he decides, this is so beautiful to me, Krishna decides that this person who's chanting my name, he is mine, she is mine. So I have to adopt him. I have to adopt her under my care. So that's a really, really beautiful thing. Just like, take yourself as an example. When someone calls your name, all of a sudden your attention becomes riveted. Hey, Andrea. Hey, Michael. You turn around, right? So in the same way, Krishna adopts us when we call out his name. We talked about trying to catch the mantra with the first Hare and try to hear the sincerity of our own voice calling out to Krishna. Otherwise, we might, always chant in this mood that, oh, I'm such a loser, I can't do this, my mind is always flying away. But just trying to hear that sincerity, that voice of sincerity. We talked about unwanted behaviors, weeds that can strangle the bhakti creeper, stunt its growth, while it's trying to reach up to the lotus feet of Krishna in the spiritual world, right? We talked about being proactive, not passive, against those internal enemies, not thinking, oh, well, this is just the way I am. No, to try to, what's that football thing? Oh yeah, the best defense is a strong offense, right? So to use that football analogy, chanting the holy name. We talked about praying for the humility to see myself as others see me. Remember that story of the bug in the bonnet of the lady in church? Maybe you remember that one. If you weren't here last week, then you can listen to the recording also. That was a pretty interesting poem we found. We talked about intruders invading the garden of our hearts. And again, being proactive to protect ourselves from becoming just a victim of lust, anger, greed, and the maxim, good fences make good neighbors. So in the garden of the heart, it's also true, good fences make good neighbors. We talked about being critical of devotees, how that's considered the elephant defense that can just destroy the whole entire garden. And then the question always comes up, well, what if you really see somebody doing something wrong? So maybe it's not your job or my job to correct that person, but find the right person who can do that, So then we talked about removing the masks I'm wearing that just block the flow of love for Krishna. These masks that I think I'm a this or I'm a that, I'm an American, I'm this and that, right? And we talked about how some weeds may look just like the bhakti creeper itself, subtle weeds in the heart, desire for honor, prestige, position. So this is a little recap. And I just want to ask, do any of you have any questions or any thoughts on this? Maybe something wasn't clear. I was zipping through this a little fast, but this was the recap. Anybody have anything that they want to clarify at all before we go on to tonight's growing love?
Haribol Mataji.
Haribol.
Last time when you asked this question about what's the end goal when we were chanting, you didn't share your expectation or your answer. You said you want everybody hear from everybody. So that's perfectly okay. I would love to hear. You are a role model, so I'd love to hear from you.
Well, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. And that's what I'm going to try to go into tonight.
Okay.
That's what I think that's what tonight is meant for, that true north, that what's it called? Pole star, aiming for the pole star of that ultimate goal. So I think that's what tonight we'll talk about. Thank you. Thanks. Anybody else? Anything that needs to be clarified before we proceed? Yeah, okay. All right. So we were using a metaphor. We were using a garden metaphor, but we're also using a metaphor of a child growing up little by little, right? The baby just trusting in the mother's lap, right? Doesn't have to do anything, just trust, and then starts to grow up and interact and starts repeating, hearing, repeating what they're learning the language of bhakti, right? Learning the meaning of all these different terms that we use, right? So in this metaphor, as we go on tonight, the child's growing bigger now, and the child's maturing to learn how to walk and sing and dance and give and take, right? This is part of growing up. And a mature child also wants to help. Someone growing up into maturity wants to help others. The older children like to help the younger ones, or ideally, right? So, so we're talking about growing love. So what is love? Well, Srimad Bhagavatam, give the verse, It's first canto, second chapter, 6th verse, actually defines love for us. And it tells us that only this highest loving devotional service, in other words, devotional service is what? Love in action. Only that can satisfy the self. So I'll say it in Sanskrit, and then I'll explain it in English. So the Sanskrit verse is, Savai punsam paro dharma yato bhaktir adhoksaje ahaitikya prityata yayatma suprasidati. So the verse says that the highest love or loving devotional service for the Supreme Lord, when it's in its highest state, is uninterrupted, and it's not motivated by any selfish material motivation. And the verse says that only that kind of love can really satisfy the self, uninterrupted, without material motivation. This kind of love as trying to love Krishna, love and serve Krishna. So this kind of love is the highest goal. And we always tend to fall short, right? But we try to aspire for it again and again, just knowing what that, like, it's important to know what that standard of love really is, right? So that's the highest love, uninterrupted, with no material motivation, loving action for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? So Chaitanya Charitamrita gives another metaphor, that this kind of pure love it describes to be like a powerful medicinal herb that actually attracts and controls Krishna within the heart. I mean, it's pretty far out to think about controlling the Supreme Controller, but this kind of Prabhupada uses the word unalloyed, right? I think he saw a sign when he was first in America, unalloyed steel, right? So he uses this term, unalloyed love. So this kind of unalloyed love is actually a powerful herb, medicinal herb, that can attract Krishna and even control Krishna. And then this is the verse from the CC, says that when there's not even a slight fragrance of that kind of pure love for Krishna in our hearts, then, talking about goals, then lesser goals become very important to us. And Prabhupada uses this phrase, lesser goals manifest their brightness. So what are those lesser goals? Like wanting yogic powers, wanting liberation, wanting to merge in oneness with Brahman. These are pretty high goals, but on the path of bhakti, they're not considered important. So those kind of lesser goals start to manifest their brightness when there's not even a slight fragrance of this powerful medicinal herb that can attract and actually control Krishna. That's, if you want to look up that verse, it's Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 19, verse 16. Beautiful verse. So in other words, the point is that lesser loves, we're talking about the highest love, which I have no right to be speaking about, right? But other lesser goals just pale in comparison to the goal of this kind of pure love. So I want to share with you a really beautiful, to me, this is like a centering, guiding prayer from Bhaktivinoda Thakur that I think sheds light on this type of meditation in the heart of a devotee. I find this prayer to be really beautiful. This is from his second songbook called Gitavali. So he says, "O merciful Lord, this is my specific submission at your lotus feet. I do not ask for bodily happiness, knowledge, wealth, or followers. Here's a nice prayer, I think. He says, let whatever attraction I presently have for material sense enjoyment, let that attraction be transformed into attraction and affection for your lotus feet." Then he says, I pray to not only that this affection for your lotus feet remains unwavering in all circumstances of happiness and distress, but that day after day it continues to grow by the influence of chanting your holy names. Then he says, and this is a very selfless prayer of a very pure devotee, he says, wherever I may take my birth, be it in the animal species, in the heavenly planets, or in hell, let this unalloyed bhakti ever grace the heart of this servant. Do you like that prayer? Nice, huh? Very, very unalloyed, very selfless. She kind of,
Yeah, what's the name of the song, Mataji?
it's a series of songs. So what I just read in English, he has in Bengali poetry and as well as English. So the book is called Gitavali. So he has one book called Sharanagati,
Okay.
and then the next book is Gitavali. It's a series of beautiful, beautiful songs. So I love this prayer. It's selfless. Let me be born in hell or as an animal, but just let that attraction for you, for loving you, increase. It's really beautiful. So the next question I think would be, well, how do we get that kind of love? We're talking about this highest pinnacle of love. So here's a really beautiful story. You might one day hear this on a recorded talk with Srila Prabhupada. So there was once a beautiful devotee. He was really a very pure devotee. I would say he was really on the platform of ecstatic love. He's no longer with us. He was a Swami named Vishnu Jan Swami. And he used to chant kirtan. You should know this, Michael. If you ever get any of his old recordings, he used to chant kirtan so beautifully that Prabhupada said his chanting of the holy name could attract the whole world. Anyway, so in this one talk, at the end of one of Srila Prabhupada's talks, this Vishnu Jan Swami asked Prabhupada, he was very ardent devotee, very intentional, and he said, how can we render perfect service to Krishna? So this was like 40 years ago, 45 years ago. We don't so much use that word perfect anymore. We've kind of like banned that word a little bit. But he asked in his question, how can we render perfect service to Krishna? And it's so beautiful when you hear this conversation. Srila Prabhupada just shoots back. He says, by your anxiety. And it's so shocking. You think, wow, I'm looking for peace. And Prabhupada's recommending anxiety. He says, by your anxiety. And so then I was also remembered that the Islamic poet Rumi also says, he says, let anxiety be the portal for spiritual awakening. So in other words, I'm not being complacent. I'm so eager for this love. Give me that love, and with a very ardent prayer, right? So here's another example of that kind of ardent, intentional prayer. This is also from Bhaktivinoda Thakur in a book he wrote called Sri Harinam Chintamani. And it's sort of like a novel, but it's Haridas Thakur speaking about the glories of the holy name through the realization of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So here's what he says, that a seriously practicing devotee, he says, will always be praying to the Lord that he can chant clear, attentive rounds with mind fixed on Krishna. For on one's own, one cannot accomplish anything. This is really important to understand, right? We think, I'm chanting. No, you're not chanting. Krishna's giving you the grace to appear if he so desires on your tongue, right? So on one's own, we can't accomplish anything. Krishna's grace is necessary to cross the ocean of material existence. And he uses the word anxiety here again. He says, being anxious at heart, one should beg for this mercy. And because Krishna is merciful, he will help. Whoever does not try for that mercy, Haridas Thakur says, is very unfortunate. So cry and beg for that mercy. And we can have faith also that if we're sincerely trying, that Krishna will help us. Some people say their most favorite verse in the whole Bhagavad Gita is verse 9:22, where Krishna says, for those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, and here it comes, he says, I will carry what they lack and preserve what they have. Like, I may be thinking, Krishna, I just can't do this. I'm a total failure. But no, Krishna said, I will carry what you lack and I will preserve what you have. That promise of Krishna is faith-giving, right? Krishna has our back. He's our eternal friend and well-wisher. And at the same time, it's amazing. He's our eternal friend and well-wisher. At the same time, he's the owner and the controller and the enjoyer of everything. And yet here he is in my heart, in the spiritual world, everywhere. And he has my best interest at heart. And so to reassure myself that the fear that I feel is not really me. It's not really true. That I am eternal, ever existing in knowledge and joy. And so the question I think to ask ourselves is, can I try to practice a new pattern and articulate it to myself? Let me try and again hear the voice of my own sincerity, calling out Krishna's name. Yeah. So then Srila Prabhupada's Guru Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati here's a nice one quote from him. He says, Krishna will be merciful to us and we shall be blessed with the gift of devotion to his divine feet, the very day that we are delivered from what he calls the evil desire of seeking advantages and honors from others. Well, we will be blessed with the gift of devotion on that very day that we are delivered from the evil desire of seeking advantages and honors from others. Wow. So what do we do if we just have no desire for this kind of love? What if you're thinking, whoa, this is pretty high stuff, but I'm just not there, you know? I'm just not there. I just don't get it. I don't have that kind of ardent, urgent desire for this kind of love. So what's the answer to that question? The answer to that question would be, then beg Krishna, be a beggar, beg Krishna, cry to Krishna. And what if you feel like, well, just my heart is just so dried up, I can't cry? Then what? Then you can cry that you can't cry for Krishna with that kind of love. If I can't cry, then I can cry that I can't cry for that kind of love. Okay, that's the recommendation. Andrea likes that. Okay, so then here's a beautiful verse from the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Bhakti Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Bhakti Yoga Dhan, which means wealth. Bhakti e Krishna Nam Smarana Krandan. The verse says, Bhakti, Bhakti, Bhakti is the greatest treasure. Bhakti means crying while remembering Krishna's holy names. That's the meaning of bhakti. Bhakti means to cry while remembering Krishna's holy names. That's Chaitanya Bhagavat Madhya Lila 2472 for all of you verse reference lovers. So in the previous classes up until now, this is class number 4. And in the previous 3, all of those discussions, we were talking about devotional service in practice. And now this is the beginning of the topic about speaking about this through this gradual progression of faith, devotional service in spontaneous love of God. So here we go with those highest goals, which is what Shrikant was asking to hear about. So looking back, there's this initial faith, right? Why does somebody even walk into a temple or a church or anything and other people just walk by? Some people have some kind of a little inkling of faith. So then that faith increases when we serve. So this devotional service in practice increases our faith. And then it grows gradually to be a fixed faith. So Andrea, I'm going to ask you to put up Lord Chaitanya's third prayer of his Sikshastakam, which is the prayer that's supposed to exemplify this stage of what's called nista, or fixed faith. So this prayer says, one should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, not seeking respect from others, devoid of a sense of false prestige. And in that state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Well, how is that? What does humility have to do with constant chanting? Well, hey, if I'm not humble, then I'm going to be thinking, I'm okay. I don't need to call out to Krishna or anybody else. I'm fine the way I am, you know. But when we can access that kind of humility and tolerance of maybe, you know, what others may say or do, you know, and be ready to offer respect and not looking for respect for myself. That's the stage that's called nistha, or fixed faith. And that's when the taste for Krishna, this is when devotion, it's considered that this is when spontaneous devotional service begins. This is when, like, we may be thinking, well, I'm a devotee, but no, we're not really even beginners yet until we come to this stage. So that's very, very important, to be fixed in that kind of faith, and fixed in humility and taking shelter of Krishna. So Andrea, can you put up the next one? Sikshastakam 4. Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women or handsome men, nor do I want any number of followers or any of the pleasures of this world. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. So this is a stage that describes when someone is so fixed, then they begin to get a taste for Krishna, not wanting any of those lower tastes, those lower goals. They become so like addicted to loving Krishna that the other things just, again, are just pale in comparison. So this is the stage of ruchi, or taste. So we're gradually progressing from faith to service, to associating with devotees, then this fixed faith, and then getting a taste. And then, I forgot to say, anartha nivritti, which means looking out for those unwanted habits. Those are all the stages coming up to this point. We discussed in previous classes the first two of Lord Chaitanya's prayers. Remember in the second prayer, I told Andrea I wasn't going to ask her to post this one. Maybe, do you have it? Can you post it? The second one of Lord Chaitanya's prayers, where he says, so here he's like in so much appreciation, gratitude for Krishna's names that are unlimited as the waves of the ocean. They're in every culture, they're in every scripture. Wow. But and there's not even any rules. You can chant it in the bathroom, you can chant it laying down, you can chant it when you're going to your mother's house, walking down the street, you know. But even though Krishna is so merciful in his holy names, I have no attraction for them. So this is starting to see the unwanted things in my heart, right? This anartha nivritti, that I'm so covered that I have no attraction for this great mercy, right? Okay, so let's go on, Andrea. So we're going to go on now to Sikshastakam prayer number 5, okay? So this is when someone is fixed. O son of Maharaj Nanda, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I have fallen into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms of your lotus feet. I just want to be, I don't even want to be anything great. I just want to be a speck of dust at your lotus feet. So devotee in this stage, this is, again, beginning this very ecstatic path to the highest pure devotion. Someone is so fixed that I don't want anything else. I just want to be fixed at your lotus feet. Beyond all other things. I don't want any of those lesser goals, right? So then this is the beginning of, let's go to the next one, verse number 6. Oh my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? So this is a description of the stage of initial ecstatic love, which is called bhava. So this is the stage when the devotee begins to dance. The child has gotten off the mother's lap. Now the child is walking, repeating and talking and singing. And now this child begins to dance. And this is the stage of ecstatic love. This is the initial inkling of ecstatic love, crying for this. When will that day be mine? There's so many beautiful songs like that, right? Okay, let's look at the next one, Andrea. So then this one, the next two verses this one and the next one, Lord Chaitanya is actually speaking in the voice of Radharani. And in this verse, he's speaking, or she's speaking, you could say, about this love and separation. So union and separation, this here I'll read it. Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like a millennium. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant, all void in the world in your absence. So this is love and separation. This is a great mood of longing. Yeah, so let's look at the next one, which represents love in union. So here again, Radharani is speaking through the mouth, of Lord Chaitanya. She says, I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me brokenhearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. In one translation of this, at the end of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada translates it as, she's praying to Krishna, she says, he's a debauchee, after all. He's a cheater, but still, he's the Lord of my life, right? So this is love and union. So, so it's described that this love and union and love and separation are described by great devotees as the two banks of a river. You know how a river has to have banks? Otherwise, it'll just spread out like the Nile across the plains, right? So the river, in order to flow strongly and swiftly, it has to have two strong banks on either side. And these, this love and union and love and separation are considered to be the banks that help the river of love flow swiftly and strongly. Okay? So maybe, Andrea, you can take that verse down. And anybody who feels inclined to put their camera on, it's really nice to see your faces, if it works for you. So I want to share a story that I really love. Okay, this is a story about the great Emperor Akbar. Hello, welcome. Hello to you. Yes, this is about the great Emperor Akbar. And he was very wise, and he was very learned and religious. And so one fine evening, he was reciting the Quran, sitting in the courtyard of a mosque and reciting his Quran very religiously. And what happened was, he was really startled by this young woman that just went like running by him. She's crying out madly, and she didn't even notice that she's practically knocking over this great emperor. Is that Michelle? Hey, Mirabai. Good to see your face. Wow, thanks for turning on your camera. So she's crying out madly. She just tears past this great emperor, and the emperor is so shocked, and he's been disturbed in his religious practice, right? And he like says to his attendants, who is this woman? She's so totally oblivious to me, her king, while I'm reading the Holy Quran. He's totally in shock, right? So the king's attendants caught her, and they bring her in front of the emperor. He's angry, right? And he's about to punish her. And so he says to her, well, just who do you think you are, creating such a disturbance right in front of your king, me, right? And then this young woman, she just very humbly apologizes. She bows her head to the great Akbar, and she tells him, she explains, and she says, the problem is I was just so desperately searching for my lover that I hadn't seen in a very, very long time. And I was just feeling such great longing and separation. Hi, Linda. Nice to see your face. Yeah, I was feeling such longing and separation. So please excuse me for my offense, So Akbar was wise, right? And he understood his own error and his own mistake, and the lesson that his Lord Allah was trying to teach him. And what was the mistake? Here he is very obediently and religiously reciting the Holy Quran. But here's this young woman who's so much more deeply engrossed in her ordinary worldly lover, and he's supposed to be focusing on divine love. So he realized that he totally didn't get it, right? He realized that he totally didn't get it and how he had such a lesson to learn from her. So he apologized to her, and then he released her without punishing her. So you like that story? I like that story a lot. Yeah. So this reminds me, there's another verse in our Bhakti Shastras or scriptures that says, just as the minds of young women take pleasure in young men, and the minds of young men take pleasure in young women, my dear Lord, kindly let my mind take pleasure in you alone. So it's kind of the same parallel idea. Here it is in Sanskrit. It's beautiful. Yuvatinam yata yuni, yunancham yuvato yata, mano biramate tadvat, mano me ramatam tvai. So yeah, let my mind take pleasure spontaneously. See, now we're not discussing bhakti in practice anymore. Tonight we're discussing bhakti or devotional service in spontaneous love. Okay. So my question to myself and to all of you is, so we're hearing all about this high ecstatic love. So why do we keep cheating ourselves out of this highest and most precious goal that we're meant to realize as really it's the highest goal of human attainment or the highest goal of human existence? So this is the taste of this highest love of Godhead, which is called Prema Bhakti Rasa. Lord Chaitanya called it Prema Pumarta Mahan. So this arta, in the Hindu tradition, there are four interests: dharma, artha, kam, moksha. That I should be religious, dharma, artha. I should have economic development. I should have some sustainability. Artha, kam, my senses should be fulfilled. My sense enjoyment should be fulfilled. And finally, we come to the point of liberation, right? But Lord Chaitanya says, no. Way beyond all of those four is this prema pumartha mahan, this highest goal of attainment, this highest love of God called prema, right? So then, so what's wrong with us? Why aren't we getting it? So Srimad Bhagavatam, for you verse number lovers, Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 3rd chapter, 24th verse, gives a diagnosis for our disease. What is it? Why don't we get this, right? What's wrong with us? So here's our diagnosis. The verse says, certainly that heart is steel framed, which in spite of chanting the holy name with concentration, change of heart does not take place. Tears do not fill the eyes, and the hairs on the body don't stand on end. This is the problem. Our hearts are steel framed. And so, you might be thinking, or someone might think, well, it's easy to imitate those kinds of symptoms of ecstasy. As a matter of fact, sometimes in Vrindavan, imitators, well, they actually take a chili pepper. You won't even believe this if you haven't heard it. If you've heard it before, you might believe it. They actually will take a chili pepper and push it up their nose. And that makes them cry and cry and cry. And then they can just move around to the temples and delude innocent people who think, oh, this is such a great devotee. Look at how he's crying out of love for God, right? So these kinds of symptoms can be imitated just to make a show, to get cheap followers, right? But the point is to not take it cheaply. The point is that privately, authentically, we should understand that these are the symptoms of a melted heart, right? How do I melt that steel framed heart? How do I melt that stone heart? And that these tears come to the eyes, or hair standing in them. These are the natural symptoms of a change of heart. So we should aspire for that authentically, not in a cheap way. But then another important point is made that there are other symptoms of advanced devotional service that can't be imitated. Well, what would some of those be? Like being friendly to every living being without any kind of sectarianism, seeing the oneness of all living beings, to not be envious of anyone, to be detached from material desires, to be prideless, to be eager to glorify the Lord constantly, being eager to not waste time. I think that's a really good one. Sometimes I feel like I'm such a time waster, but wow, to know that every moment belongs to Krishna, to not waste any time, that's actually a symptom of ecstatic love. Time is Krishna. My time belongs to Krishna, right? And always wanting to be serving the Lord. These are authentic symptoms of bhava, or this ecstatic love, that really are much more difficult to imitate. Yeah. So if we're not seeing this kind of change of heart in ourselves, then we have to look within our hearts and ask ourselves, why, right? What is it that I'm doing? What maybe I'm committing some kind of offenses to the holy name, and just pray to the holy name to help me overcome these offenses by the grace of the holy name, by the grace of this divine couple. So we say, sometimes people say the holy name, but the holy name is that divine couple, Radha and Krishna, right? So if you don't know those offenses, it's called 10 offenses to the holy name. Really, it's 11, because the last one that's kind of added on to the end is kind of almost like one of the main ones, to be inattentive while chanting the holy name. You can find it on Google. You can find it if you have a temple songbook. But this is important to understand. So these offenses. So yeah, I'd say the two that we're usually most guilty of are inattentive chanting, and then the other one is maintaining material attachment, even after hearing so many instructions about the glories of the holy name, right? Then there are other ones. We could talk about those more if you want. So the point is to beg Krishna to help us see what we're doing wrong, and to help us correct our inattention and our mistakes. Because the fact is, we can't do it by ourselves. But if Krishna sees that we're begging him, that that's what we want, then he can help us see what we're doing wrong, right? Yeah. So we talked about what is real love of God, and we talked about its symptoms. We talked about the practices of loving devotional service and how to progress in loving devotional service. So then here we come to this. So what is the ultimate goal of awakened, attentive practice of bhakti? What is that ultimate, if I don't want to settle, right, for something lower, for some lesser taste? Hello, Katie. Okay, so what is that ultimate goal? So you could say, to begin with, to just get out of the cycle of repeated birth and death altogether, right? And to rejoin Krishna in his sweetest pastimes of love and play in Sri Vrindavan Dham, spiritual realm that's beyond all the barriers and restrictions of awe and reverence like they have in other spiritual planets, like in the Vaikuntha planets, where everybody's all Alleluia, Alleluia, with hands folded, standing up straight. You better stand up straight, because this is very serious and very reverential. Well, in Vrindavan Dham, that's all just thrown out, right? In Vrindavan, the cowherd boys are climbing on Krishna's back, and the gopis are chastising Krishna for being late for their rendezvous, etc., right? So Lord Chaitanya, or Krishna says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, this is a really, it's called like a Mahavakya, a great statement of the Chaitanya Charitamrita that's so revealing. So Krishna says, love that's made feeble by feelings of awe and reverence, that love does not attract me, Krishna's saying. People are chanting the Vedic hymns, Krishna's maybe not even really listening that much because he's too busy talking to the cows in Vrindavan. And he's too busy asking them, are you missing your mother? Do you need me to scratch behind your ear? Do you need a little hug? He's so busy talking to the cows and the gopis and the cowherd boys that those great scholars who are chanting the Vedic hymns, maybe he's sort of not even really hearing them. Or the yogis who are trying to see God in the heart, right? They're meditating on the super soul within the heart, but he's not talking to them. He's talking to the cows. He's talking to the gopis. He's talking to the cowherd boys, right? So that's a pretty high level of love, right? So, yeah, so this is, I would say this is the most precious gift that Lord Chaitanya has bestowed upon all of us. That Krishna, he's just telling us, Krishna's inviting us to join his loving play as a friend or a parent or a conjugal lover, just following in that ecstatic, sweet mood of the gopis without any reverence, without any awe and reverence. So, yeah, this, I would say, is the ultimate gift of Lord Chaitanya. And I don't want to, so early on, Shrikant, you asked, well, what's my goal? Well, personally, I don't want to be cheated. I don't want to cheat myself anymore out of attaining this kind of goal, pursuing lesser goals like liberation or yogic powers. Wow, it'd be pretty cool to have yogic powers, right? Well, not as wonderful as being able to attract Krishna in your heart by your own love, you know? So yeah, these are the rare treasures that are just being gifted to us so freely by Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya's appearance day is coming up on Monday. And even if you're far, far away from some kind of a temple, you can remember him and hear about him, read about him, try to do some chanting or singing for him on Monday. But I wanted to share this. So I was just talking about being cheated by having lesser goals, right? So here's a poem by a prayer by a great devotee named Prabodhananda Saraswati in a mood of lamentation. And he's lamenting because he's feeling he's cheated himself. So here's what he says. He says, in India, it's considered if you say something 3 times, it's like for super emphasis. So he says this 3 times. He says, I am cheated. I am cheated. I am cheated. Of this, there is no doubt. He says, although Lord Gauranga, Lord Chaitanya, has plunged the entire world in a flood of love of Krishna, I have not been touched by even a single drop. Wow. So, you know, that kind of ardent longing to not be cheated, I think that's what's being requested of us, you know. So don't be discouraged if you're feeling cheated. Monday is a very good day for faith building, and you can pray to Lord Chaitanya for his mercy. And just so that we are not ending on a sad note of lamentation, I wanted to share something else really, really beautiful with you. This is the 4th verse of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So for Adi Lila, 1st chapter, 4th verse. This is a prayer of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami to all of us. He says, actually, it was spoken by Rupa Goswami and then repeated by Krishnadas Kaviraj in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he says, may that Lord, it's a blessing. It's really a blessing more than a prayer. He says, may that Lord, who is known as the son of Srimati Sachi Devi, be transcendently situated in the innermost chambers of your heart, resplendent with the radiance of molten gold. He has appeared in the age of Kali by his causeless mercy to bestow what no other incarnation has ever offered before, the most sublime and radiant, shining mellow of devotional service, the mellow of conjugal love. So you want to hear that verse in Sanskrit? It's really beautiful in Sanskrit. Okay, I'll read it in Sanskrit. Anarpita charim chirat karuna avatirna kalau samarpaitam unnat uchalarasam swabhakti shriyam hari purata sundara dutika damba sandipita sada hridaya kandare spuratuva sachinandana. So that's the blessing of Krishnadas Kaviraj on all of us, that Lord Chaitanya be situated in the innermost chambers of our heart. So thank you all so much. These are some thoughts on that highest, most ultimate goal of achievement, this highest rasas of love. Actually, it's described that underneath this body, which is kind of like a coat, there's actually in an embryonic form, an undeveloped form, there's a spiritual body that's meant to be developed by this process of chanting, by the process of devotional service. So that spiritual body that's inherent in ourselves becomes developed. That body that's full of relationships with Krishna as a mother or a father or a friend or a lover, that's all waiting to be developed by the process of bhakti. So personally, I find this very exciting and hope-giving. So thank you all so much. What are your reflections? What touched your heart? What would you like to reflect? Or maybe some of you might have questions or something. Anything that you can reflect back? Thank you.
Rukmini, there's a question in the chat from Shrikant.
Okay.
He's asking, what is the verse number, please?
Of what?
I'm assuming that's for what you just sung.
For the last one? Okay, that is Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila, first chapter, 4th verse. It's one of the very first verses of Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is a verse that I chant every morning when I'm waking up my deities. Such a beautiful blessing. As a matter of fact, in our Washington temple, we used to have a gigantic sign that it was a banner that we used to hang over the altar. Whoa, I think it's lost now with all of the construction, whatever, but it was actually this verse that we would hang over the altar, and anyone who walked in the temple would get blown away by the ecstatic benediction of this verse. So I think it's very powerful. What else? What was a good takeaway? What's a reflection for some of you?
Hare Krishna Mataji. This is Rukmini Priya. Mataji, I was appreciating how you're explaining, faith building, that Lord Krishna will carry what we lack and preserve what we have. So not to have fear, and fear is not real.
Thank you. That's really important, isn't it? Because, yes, we have this talkative monkey mind that's always telling us something else, but we can, we can just tell it, no, that's not who I am. I'm not coming from a place of fear. I'm coming from a place of love. And what I really want to fear, sometimes actually Prahlad Maharaj in his prayers, he says, what's really meant to be feared is going back again into this cycle of repeated birth and death. That's what's meant to be feared. That I will lose this chance of this beautiful love of Krishna, this Krishna consciousness. So that's the one thing that we should fear, that no, I'm going to take this seriously this time. Maybe I've done this devotional service. Maybe I've done it before. This time I'm going to be serious. I'm not going to go back into some other chance of some other. But I like Bhaktivinoda Thakur's prayer also, where he says, send me wherever you want to send me. You can send me to hell, or you can send me into an animal species. But wherever you send me, just let that attraction for Krishna's holy name increase. And whatever attraction I have for material stuff, let that get transferred to attachment to the holy name. So I think those are all really beautiful prayers. So what else? What else is a good reflection or takeaway? I'm going to tag you, my dear Mirabai. What's a reflection from you?
Oh, well, thank you, Hare Krishna. Well, I was appreciating how you were saying the question that you like to ask yourself about or that's what I wrote down, is how to melt the steel framed heart. And I think that will be a question that I'll spend some time thinking about myself as well. I think that's an important question. And then actually Rukmini Priya's reflection, I was thinking about how I think fear is part of that steel framed heart. You know, we think of, or I think of steel framed heart as obstinacy or, you know, kind of an aggressive thing, but really I think it's also comprised of a lot of insecurities, a lot of, you know, fear. So I'll be thinking more about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And what's fear? We hear fear is false evidence appearing real, right? False evidence appearing real. So, but there are some things to fear. I can fear that I'll go back into repeated birth and death, or fear that, oh, I don't want to forget Krishna, or beg Krishna to carry what we lack. You know, Krishna, I'm lacking so much. I'm just not getting it. Or, you know, I'm so complacent and I just feel like, well, this is me, take it or leave it. No, I have to be ardent and intentional and longing and begging for it, right? I love that Prabhupada said, by your anxiety. Isn't that something? It's so different from the path of other yogas that shanti, shanti, just want to be peaceful. No, by your anxiety. That's the difference between the path of bhakti and the other paths of yoga that are just seeking that kind of equilibrium place, right? What else? What else? Somebody like to share what's a reflection or what's a takeaway? What was important for you?
Very well, Mataji. It's not a reflection, maybe just a comment or maybe a question. You asked about why we don't have that attraction for Krishna. I mean, I often reflect on that one because I hear all these constantly from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, from Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas. The reality is the instant gratification we get day in and day out, which is if I don't work, I'll get fired. If I don't eat, I will starve. If I don't get money, I won't bill. I get that, but I don't have that realization. And I mean, having heard and seen leaders like you from Srila Prabhupada, seeing that pure devotee, maybe that inspiration makes you feel a little bit realized. But people like us who haven't seen that pure devotee, it's just a concept, it's an abstract concept we often grapple with, which is it a sentiment, is a figment of imagination, or is it real? And my pendulum constantly oscillates between those two.
Thank you for your always vulnerability. Well, first of all, I'll say that I'm not a pure devotee, and I'll say that many people who saw Prabhupada didn't get it. Many people who saw Krishna didn't get it. You know, there are plenty of people on the earth when Krishna was here who didn't get it at all. And the fact is, you know, I think that when we recognize that in ourselves, which we do every day, all of us, that's the time to pause and to really cry out to Krishna, say, please help me get it, because I don't get it. I see the necessity for food. I see the necessity for money. I see the necessity for all the things that I have to do in my life, but I'm not, actually Prabhupada calls it the Govinda necessity. Isn't that beautiful? He calls it the Govinda necessity. I don't see the Govinda necessity, so please help me see it. So that's time for prayer. I would say you may be standing in the elevator in the office or wherever you are, you know, in some other place, and you can just take a pause and cry to Krishna, you know, that I just don't see that Govinda necessity. Help me see. I'm so blind, right? Isn't that's the beautiful Christian prayer? I was blind, but with amazing grace, I began to see. So we can also pray for that kind of amazing grace, unprecedented grace, to be able to see what we don't see. Or then in our own prayer, Om Jnana Timrandas, I was standing in the darkness of ignorance, my eyes tightly shut, but you came with the Gyan Anjana, this ointment of knowledge, and opened my eyes. So we have to pray for it, because Krishna, you know, he's not going to force himself on us. He's not that kind of a lover. You know, if he sees that we can take him or leave him, he will be equally reserved toward us. But if he sees that we're longing for it, crying for it, like that's why I love that story of that woman with Akbar, right? He's so religious and he's reading his Quran, and then he realizes how he doesn't get it. He's religious, following all the rules, and she's like screaming for her lover. And he realizes, why am I not screaming for divine love, right? So that's what we need to go to that place. We need to cry and beg for it. And if I see that I'm so complacent, so lackadaisical, so yeah, then I have to cry even more and read the label of the diagnosis on the bottle. It's because my heart is steel framed. It's because I have a heart of stone. So how am I going to melt that stone heart? By crying, 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 right? So, and then if we don't cry, then what was the other solution? Cry that we can't cry, right? I'm going to cry that I can't cry. What else? What else was a takeaway, or what else was important? Can I tag you, Katie?
I will. Sure. I wrote down, Krishna is my eternal friend. And I've been feeling pretty anxious, actually, thinking about, anxiety just before, with some changes to my job and unknowns and new structure, and it's been stressful. And but it was making me remember learning recently about like this line, like how you said, like our like true north and our constant available connection with Krishna. And like I was learning how it's like there's like a line, a spiritual line, and then the material world line. And it was comforting to remember to like step back into this line. And I've also was learning recently about more about Lord Chaitanya, and like thinking about the guru, your guru, and your guru is always thinking about his guru, and on and on and up in this beautiful line that ultimately goes back to thinking of like Chaitanya, who's thinking of Radha and Krishna. And it reminds me of the creeper. So I was really so grateful to be reminded to like step back into this line and not as much, because it's hard, to not get stressed out in the material world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful reflection. And then, we're thinking vertically, like growing up in that devotional creeper, we can also sometimes be a little horizontal, share it, share it with anyone who's, open to hear. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. What else? What other reflections? Shy group, somebody share a reflection. Sasha Lee, Linda, Opie, Scarlett, Michael, come on.
Hello, Mataji.
Hey, Sasha Lee.
It's Sasha Lee. Hi. I love what you said earlier about Krishna is giving me the grace to chant his name on my tongue. I just love that.
Beautiful. So
that
much.
image. And
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
Thank you. The fact that we even have a tongue, that's Krishna's grace, right? It's amazing. So he gives us the tongue, and we can just use it in any way we want, right? You can just be wagging all kinds of gossip, or it can be chanting Krishna's name. Sashali, I always think of, Lord Chaitanya has this name, Sashi Mukhi, which means moon face. So I always think of that name when I see your name. So yeah. What else? Michael, I'm going to tag you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, there seems to be, from what I can tell, there's something a little bit paradoxical going on. And I think when we try to resolve paradoxes, they give us a little bit of anxiety, and that may have something to do with the anxiety you were referring to earlier. And the paradoxes, as you were talking, I noted down a few, and I'll relate them. First of all, we have the philosophy of Achintya Beta Beta Tattva, which is that simultaneous oneness and difference, which is paradoxical. There is a line in Prahlad that Prahlad says, where he says that the unhappiness in the world is caused by people's attempts to become happy. So, you know, there's another paradox. And another paradox is that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, and he's Radharani, and he's Krishna and Radharani. And it doesn't resolve neatly. That's not something that goes back to the Achintya Beta Beta Tattva. It doesn't resolve in a comfortable sort of non-anxiety producing way. And it seems to me that in the way to happiness, it has something to do with thinking nothing of your happiness, but only with the happiness of other people.
Yes, you're getting it.
And
yeah.
that's a paradox, right? Like it doesn't fully make sense, but we sort of want to reach the point where our own personal satisfaction, happiness, comfort are irrelevant. That the only thing that matters is that the person we care about is happy, comfortable, and satisfied.
Beautiful.
And so finally, you know, we're talking about love of Krishna, but it strikes me that that's something, if we think that's something that we can accomplish, we'll never get there, because it's not something we accomplish. Real love isn't something you accomplish, it's something that happens to you.
Right.
So it seems to me that the whole point of the practices of bhakti are to make yourself lovable in the hope that Krishna brings that love. But it's not something beyond that, it's not something that's accomplished, because Krishna is in love, requires the independence, the complete independence of the loved. So Krishna can do whatever Krishna wants to do. And we want that love. And it seems to me like the highest goal of all this is to not really be concerned with our own happiness, but only in pleasing Krishna at whatever cost or expense to our well-being, comfort, and happiness even. So that's what I was thinking.
That's very high stuff. But you know, all paradoxes are resolved at the lotus feet of Krishna, because he is beyond all of our all of our scrutiny and all of our microscopes and all of our trying to fit it, all of his wonderfulness inside our brains. So I love this idea of these paradoxes, because it's so beautiful, because it's almost as though he is the resolution to the problem of all paradoxes, And I thought it was just so deep what you were saying. So yeah, you're kind of talking about really, really high love. So, we're not on that place where we can be like Radharani or imitate Radharani's love, but we can recognize that, you know what, I was thinking today about serving other people or serving Krishna or helping, and I just felt so happy, and I wasn't even thinking about my own and just note when that happens. So it's not a matter of imitating it, And then this beautiful, what you started by saying, this achintya beta beta tattva, this inconceivable simultaneous oneness and difference, that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, and yet he's Radharani, and yet he's, it's all so inconceivable. And that's what's part of its wonderfulness. So the paradox is part of the absolute beauty of Krishna, that he's just so beyond our understanding, and that he can never fit into our tiny little brains, all the wonderful things he does, like, the beautiful prayers of the devotees, the gopis and all the cowherd boys. And it's just all so inconceivable. And I think that's part of the beauty. If he could fit neatly inside our brains. Prabhupada talks about Dr. Frog. Did you ever hear the Dr. Frog philosophy? Dr. Frog philosophy is, the frog is, he has a friend, another frog, who came from the ocean, and this other frog is telling this frog who lives in a well, he's telling this other frog, you just can't even imagine how big the ocean is. And so this frog who lives in a well, he's like going, well, come on. I mean, is it twice the size of my well? Maybe 3 times the size of my well? It's like, no, you just can't even imagine the size of the ocean. It's just such a paradox. It's so gigantic. So, this is kind of our position in this material world. We kind of think, God, he's eternal, all pervading, and he sits in my heart. He's there if I want him, but, I might not really want him today. And it's just like all these things that are kind of like trying to fit it all inside our brains, that he never really fits, and that's part of his wonderfulness. So thank you for thinking so deeply and wrestling with all of these inconceivable wonderfulness of Krishna.
I had another thought, and I wanted to sort of run it by you.
Okay.
And that is our sort of anxiety that we have at not having really the love of Krishna. And that's probably, that's a deep anxiety. Is that somehow reflected in Krishna himself and his desire to become Lord Chaitanya, because he had that anxiety of not knowing what this love of Radharani really was, what it really felt like? Like, is that on the spiritual platform also, this anxiety of wanting more, and being afraid of missing whatever golden opportunity this life provides us? I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah, it's sort of there. Krishna was feeling that Radharani is enjoying more than he's enjoying, but also Krishna, when he comes as Lord Chaitanya, one of his other purposes in spreading the holy name is that he wants to catch those of us who've run away, who've avoided his mercy in different ways. So he's feeling, he's also feeling like a little hole in his heart. Like, I don't know if you've heard that there's this Franciscan theologian, Richard Rohr, who says that we all in this world, we have a God-sized hole in our hearts. We live with a God-sized hole in our hearts. So Krishna also has like a little hole in his heart that's supposed to be filled with that little place where Michael is supposed to be dancing with him, or where Shrikant is supposed to be dancing, or Andrea, or Mirabai, or Linda, or Scarlett, or Gail, or Poppy, So he also is, it's like he has devotees who have unlimited qualities, perfect love. They have so many opulences and so much more than realizations, more than we could ever imagine. But yet he still is feeling a little bit of a lacking, that we're not sharing our love with him. Did you ever see that picture? Maybe all of you have seen that beautiful picture of the one cowherd boy who's Krishna's embracing him. It's a really beautiful, it's from the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, with this, it's 3 wonderful volumes of this travels of this Gop Kumar who travels throughout the universe, is trying to find there's the picture right there. This Gop Kumar is trying to find his own relationship with Krishna that feels right to him, finally, when he makes it back to Krishna Loka, he realizes he's a cowherd boy. He's been through so many universes. He went to the Vaikunthas and he went to heavenly planets. He went all over the place. But then he realizes actually what really fills his heart is being a cowherd boy in love with Krishna. And when he goes up there to the spiritual world, Krishna just comes and embraces him and says, wow, I've been missing you so much. Where have you been? So that's the beautiful love that, so that's a paradox also, that the one supreme enjoyer, supreme controller, cause of all causes, the source of everything, could be feeling a little bit of lacking almost, or anxiety, you put it, anxiety, that he's not understanding the love of Radharani, and he's not tasting the love in his relationship with Shrikant or Linda or Zashali or Popi or Rukmini Priya or Andrea. Isn't that amazing? So that's a paradox, but I think it's such a worshipable paradox, don't you think? I mean, rather than just like trying to squeeze it into our brains and figure it out, the fact is we can just worship the paradox. I think that's really a worshipable paradox. What else? We have a few more minutes. Somebody who hasn't shared, would somebody like to share? Anybody? Anybody? Some reflection that you can share. It's so rich when we all hear your sharing. It's much better than when I'm just yakking away. So please don't be shy. There must be something that was a takeaway for you that you're going to remember tonight or share with your kids or your partner.
Looks like Linda's ready to share.
Linda.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi, Rukmini. I'm so sorry. I'm in the temple and I just have to speak a little softly.
What temple are you in?
The Bhakti Center.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm part of the garland team here, so we're making the garlands for the festival. So
nice.
it's wonderful. Yes, thank you so much. It's a beautiful. Everything just sounds like poetry. I just a reflection on just a point you made a little while ago about how Krishna, you have to want to be with him. Like he won't force anything. But I always remember this. I don't know where I first heard it, but that if you take a few steps towards him, he will take 100 steps towards you. So I always love that, and it's always stuck with me. It's always been like so inviting, So that's all I wanted to share. Thank you.
So much. That beautiful Murlidhar there at the Bhakti Center, right? Beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So we should have that faith that if I can just get out of my little headspace, my fears, my anxieties, my hesitations, then take a few steps, that Krishna will just, smooth that path for us. Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? We have 5 minutes. Scarlett or Poppy or Megan. Anybody else like to share? Andrea?
Gail has her hand up.
Okay, Gail.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, my what I've heard, which I think is really inspiring, is that when we experience Krishna's like jaw-dropping affection for us personally, it's like, who cares about understanding his complexities and trying to fit his big self in our tiny brain? We don't care about that, because all of us want anyway is to love and be loved by Krishna. And once you taste that, once you have that experience, that's the only thing that you care about. is that love, the love that's illustrated by that picture that Andrea showed just a little bit ago, you know, of Krishna embracing with such deep affection his devotee, his long lost devotee, you know, and that the relishment of that love, you know, overshadows or it overshadows any other desire for, let's say, trying to understand him or figure him out, you know.
Yeah, beautiful, Gail. Thank you so much. Yeah, on the path of bhakti, knowledge is subservient to love. You know, this is not a path of gaining knowledge, because we can never really know him fully. We can only try to love him, and we can never even love him fully, but we just try to place our love and place our love again, offer that flower again and again. That was beautiful. I think we just have a couple of minutes. I want to mention to all of you that we have a lovely gathering on Wednesday nights. So it's a patron community, Patreon community. And if you'd like to join, you can go to patreon.com/Rukmini Walker and join us. It's lovely. It's from right around this kind of time, 6:30 p.m. until about, it's shorter though, 6:30 until about 7:10 or 7:15 every Wednesday night. And we're discussing Krishna book. And love to have you join us. This is our last session of the 4, and I hope it was helpful to you. I hope this progression of planting faith and growing love was helped you along your path. And I hope that your bhakti creepers are growing up and winding around the tree of life, which is Lord Krishna, and winding to the lotus feet of Krishna in the spiritual world. So I will meet you there. At the lotus feet of Krishna. Even if you live in Tucson, Mirabai, I will still meet you there at the lotus feet of Krishna in the spiritual world. So thank you all so much. This has been such a great honor and pleasure for me, and hope to see you again in other classes. And if you feel inclined, if you're available Wednesday nights, if you can join, it would be lovely to have you. Thank you all so much. Gail and Michael and Shrikant and Mirabai and Katie and Linda and Andrea and Scarlett and Megan and Poppy and Zashali and Rukmini and all the other people who have been there sometimes and couldn't come tonight. I know who will listen to the recordings as well. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so much. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
And
Hare Krishna.
the links for the Patreon and the YouTube are in the chat. If anybody wants to click on them real quick before we close out the Zoom. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you all. Hare Krishna.